Hey, my friend, welcome back. In this episode, we're going to talk about the importance of major and trace minerals in your body. I'm going to be showing you the results of my hair minerals test so you can see what that looks like and you can see how you could use yours to fix some of the deficiencies or excesses in your body. So let's get started. Hey, I'm here with Barton Scott, who is the founder of Upgraded Formulas, and this is part 2 of our interview. We did part 1 just a little while ago where we talked about the hair mineral test and how that's so important in understanding the different levels in your body so you can finally not only understand them, but get a grasp of them and take some actionable insights from them. So Barton, welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks Show.
Faraz, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Great. So in this part 2, as I mentioned, we're going to go deeper into my results and also talk about the experience that I had doing the hair mineral test, which you sent me. Thank you for that. And we'll dig deep and hopefully a lot of folks can learn from what's going on and how they can use this information that we discuss. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. So the first thing I want to touch on is when I got the kit, how I actually got my hair onto the kit and back to you. And so it comes in a really cool little package that you take, and the instructions are on the kit. So you're able to take your hair from multiple sections of your head. So what I did is I took some from the temples over here, and I took some from the side and definitely some from the back. And if you don't have hair on your head, there's instructions for how to get it from different parts of your body too. But it was pretty simple. I just needed, in one instance, I needed a friend to help me because I was doing it right from the back. And I wanted to make sure that I got the hair from as close to the root as possible, which is what you recommend, correct, Barton?
Yeah, correct. You can do it yourself if you use a hand mirror, for example, or if you kind of do it by touch. It's always easier if someone helps you, but it's not necessary. And it's still way less of a pain than, driving across town to your doctor, waiting in the waiting room, getting stuck with a needle, kind of hurried out of there in 5 minutes, like we've talked about in the first podcast, which we'll have to let people know which number that is so they can go and listen to that, because I really like some of the things you pointed out there too. And I think that was a really informative one, and it touches on the mineral absorption for anyone looking for just optimizing their health in general. But yeah, that's exactly right. So.
Okay, so, we talked about this at length in the last episode, but Barton, I'd like you to touch on quickly your background and how you got into hair mineral testing in the first place.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, it was a personal journey for me. Certainly, it not something I wanted to have happen, but I'd studied chemical engineering, and I had studied nutrition since I was a teenager. But because of being an athlete, because of also being on prescriptions for things like Vyvanse and Adderall, I pushed out a lot of nutrients from my system by my early 20s. And my short-term memory started to really fade. I lost someone close to me, and I started thinking about longevity and what really mattered, and what could really move the needle. And what I ultimately settled on was that not vitamins but minerals were these fundamental building blocks of everything. And just I noticed after a lot of different personal testing on myself, over $10,000 worth, and in about a year, that that a test like what we offer today at Upgraded Formulas was really the way to go. As far as like a step one, as an overview, as identifying what was wrong, and then from there I realized I wasn't absorbing the things I needed to absorb. So as a chemical engineer, it's something I understood really well. And then from there, it just became a multi-year journey to figure out how I could just teach a manufacturer to do what I needed done. And yeah, we have some great products now that really, really absorb super well. So you can actually support these deficiencies that everyone has. They're just you'll be low in this, I'll be low in something else. And then that changes every so often as we target those, as we find out what they are and support them. So it's an ongoing basis sort of thing. I think we'll test you again in 90 days, and maybe we'll do another round of this so people can see. But yeah, it's so critical because no matter what you want to do in your life, you have to have this energy, this sap. And most people today are aware they needed electrolytes, for example, but good God, they're just not absorbing nearly what they think they are. Yeah. So anyway, a couple thoughts there.
Yeah, no, great. Thank you for the explanation. Now, I know that in today's world with nutrition and diets where we are, people get lost in the macros, which are protein, carbohydrates, and fats, right? Everybody's talking about the macros, muscle builders, the original biohackers, as well as the folks in the new diets, such as the keto or the paleo diets. Where do minerals fit in, and why are they so important to our health?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with with the keto world, for example, a lot of people are very aware that they need electrolytes. But like I just talked about, absorption is an issue. With paleo, there seems to be an idea that I think they're both great diets that, but all diets are tools. With paleo, all our products would be considered paleo, they'd be considered keto. They don't contain calories. So I just did a 5-day fast, for example, and I did water, just our minerals, and a couple teaspoons of salt each day. And that was enough to keep me strong, keep my adrenals, my thyroid working and functioning, and just benefit from all the different improvements, which also certainly help with longevity. So yeah, real big factor. I would say it fits in really nicely with both. So yeah.
Great. Now
or with all diets. So
now there are important minerals that our body needs, Barton, as far as I understand it, and there's trace minerals. Can you explain to the listeners the difference between these two?
Yeah, certainly. So, it's really just an amount per, percentage. So really, what I would say is that, there are minerals that are found in, for example, in the order of pounds in the body. Your body will contain several pounds of calcium, several pounds of magnesium. They only contain trace amounts of vanadium, germanium, things of that nature, right? But that doesn't mean that those aren't incredibly important for certain enzymatic reactions in the body. And yeah, so when we understand these things, we are able to get a better window in how we're handling stress. Because if we're out of both, whether it's a mineral or a trace mineral, it will reduce our overall ability to function as we would like to, right? There will be some cost there. And maybe that's hair loss, maybe that is life in general, just dying sooner than you would have. Maybe it's just not having the energy, not having the mental clarity, not having the or on the positive side, just not being plagued by anxiety, so
yeah,
etc. Sleep quality, you could go on and on. So
yeah,
thyroid function, adrenal function, yeah.
And even immune support.
Oh yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Okay, so let's dive into the report itself, which is what we want to do in this session. And I got the 2-page report. It's very handy. It's easy to see what's going on, at least at the surface, and we're going to dig deeper with you. But if we look at the first page, one of the first things that's on the top of that is the metabolic type. And mine came out to slow 1. Yeah. What does that mean?
Well, this is actually right there where most people are, actually. So slow and fast, it's kind of misleading, and I would say it's not incredibly important for listeners. And to try to explain it in a short amount of time and kind of teach it would probably be misleading. The best way to go, I know you'll mention later, but we offer consultations on upgradedformulas.com as well. Faraz will give you a code as well that you can try for being a first-time customer. But what it provides an insight into is a couple of your ratios, the most important of which being your calcium and phosphorus. So then that can be dictated by high levels of calcium. That can be dictated by low levels of phosphorus. But in this case, you have a pretty normal calcium to phosphorus ratio. In your particular case, individually speaking, calcium's not super high, phosphorus isn't super low, but together the ratio is more important than the individual levels. And this is where a trained eye understands these things and knows how to make the proper adjustments. Believe me, the first time you look at this, you will either misinterpret it or you'll get only a fraction of the value. It's just the nature of the beast. There's a lot between the numbers that just isn't listed. So in this case, to better increase your fat burning ability, which I think is really at the heart of what most people want to know, is, pretty much everyone wants to have a bit less fat, a bit more muscle, or certainly at least a bit less fat. So, how do we do that? Well, we increase that metabolic capacity, right? So in this case, it would be great for you to do a survey of your diet, reduce calcium, foods that contain calcium, even if they're considered good overall, right? Because based on your levels right now, I mean, your sodium to potassium, for example, is perfect pretty much. That's your adrenal function, which is great. It's really rare to see. However, your metabolism could use a little bit of support. So the way you can improve that would be, for example, grass-fed meats on the phosphorus side, and just naturally reducing your calcium. You can also, based on your other levels, you could be taking magnesium, which I'd recommend our upgrade magnesium because of the absorption rate. People can hear all about that in the previous podcast that you've posted probably by this time, and when they hear this one. So that's really interesting because it'll improve this ratio for you as well, just by the nature of how those two interact, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's jump into page 1, which is where you've listed the nutritional elements, and I'll post my results for folks to see so they can take a look at what this report looks like and what it tells them. So if we go down the list, Barton, there's the nutritional elements on page 1, which, as you said, there's a reference range, there's a low end of the range, and there's a high end of the range. And I'll talk about some of the outliers for myself. I seem to be in the low end of the reference range for sodium and potassium, as well as iron, magnesium, and phosphorus, but very high on copper. Mm-hmm. But I'm still within the normal range, so I'm not low in any one of these, am I?
Yeah, I mean, I would consider that your levels are very good, and based on life today, very normal. You're not actually in the low range, but I would say that you would benefit from optimizing your potassium levels and your sodium levels, your iron, your phosphorus, your manganese. So yeah, those are some things that could be really helpful. Our one product that I'd recommend for you based on your zinc to copper ratio, which again is more important than your individual levels, is our upgraded sugar support, just because it has manganese in it, it has zinc in it, it has chromium in it, and it has trace minerals, and all of these have been put through our process. It's proprietary to essentially digest. You could think of the minerals for you so that you can absorb them without digestion into your cells, where they can get to work and then start, fixing the things that need to be fixed, balancing the things that need to be balanced. So yeah, I mean, it is a really good looking profile. For anyone listening, Faraz is definitely going to make it. He's got a lot of life ahead of him. No, these are good results, certainly.
Okay, great. I have a couple of questions for you in this regard. With sodium, it's very interesting. You would read mass media reports or even health influencers talking about how there's so much sodium in our lives, especially when we eat food outside. And that's true because there's a lot of salt, which is what's satiating, which is what makes us or our primal instincts feel that food is good. It's what we need when there's high in sodium and high in fats.
Right.
And for that reason, I avoid a lot of salt. I haven't been eating out as much. And so, I'll have a smoothie, a mostly greens smoothie with some protein in the morning, and I'll have, some good meat, or I'll have some lentils, which my paleo friends won't appreciate, but I do eat lentils. They're soaked overnight. Um,
Mm.
However, so I'm not eating a lot of sodium in my diet. And, a few months ago, I used to wake up every morning and have a big glass full of warm water with sodium and lemon or lime.
Mm-hmm.
And I've recently stopped that, and I should probably get back on that because I'll up my sodium levels
Yeah.
just easily from the comfort of my home.
Yeah, some Himalayan in the morning, or Celtic. What I would do in your case, based on your levels, again, for anyone listening, these are particular to Faraz. So if you choose to try to implement some of these changes, please do test and not guess. This is one of our slogans. I mean, it's so central to what we do and believe, and that's that. You may think that you have some of the similar signs and symptoms that Faraz has, or I have, and anyone else has, but you really need to know what your levels are before you jump in and start supplementing things that, like our supplements, things that actually work, things that actually absorb, because your levels will change based on that. Because of that, we'll look at his results again in another 2 to 3 months. But in this particular case, your sodium's a 9, potassium's a 4. Those numbers, aren't as important as overall ratios, but as that relates to magnesium and as that relates to calcium, these things start to represent both your adrenal expression and thyroid expression. And although hair is a much better source of data, it's much more accurate. It's more of a trend instead of a data point, as with blood. It still will, when it comes to, say, thyroid blood panels, unless there's been an abnormality, it will line up with that. So it's interesting to see your results here, and with your significant ratio on page 2. Being what it is, I would certainly, again, recommend reducing calcium consumption. We talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
And increasing potassium. So upgrade potassium is phenomenal. You can add that to your water, and also just continue eating more foods in potassium that are, at least are supposed to have high levels of potassium. But as you and I have both talked about, the soil isn't what it used to be. And, people like Zach Bush and, friends like that of mine, or we're out there working and doing the right things for a long-term sort of benefit of our soil, which needs to be regenerated. But frankly, our soil, our food, our climate, it just doesn't have the nutrients we need. So we do need these short-term solutions, which is, very precise supplementation that works. So.
Mm-hmm. No, it's fair. Thank you, Barton. Now, you mentioned something I want to follow up on. You said that the individual profiles of these minerals is less important than these significant ratios on page number 2. Why is that?
Well, it's because as they intermingle, as they relate to each other, the network effects are much stronger.
I see. So in my instance, as you mentioned, my calcium is very high. My calcium is very high relative to my phosphorus as well as my potassium.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to up those 2 levels, the phosphorus and the potassium, and reduce my calcium to get them back into balance.
Yeah, in this particular case, you can use magnesium, potassium, sodium. All of those will help stabilize your calcium level, mm-hmm. and you just naturally, stop consuming calcium from the different places, and that can hide in places like water as well. There's a lot of different sources, but virtually no person that we see, and I've looked at so many of these over the years, needs calcium. Almost no one. Many people need magnesium, many people need potassium, but not every person does. And we also see that. So it's great not to guess. So yeah, we're on the right track here.
Great. And I agree with you 100%, right? I recently got into understanding my mineral status. And had I not gotten this report, I would have had no idea what's going on. It's
Right.
very important to see what's going on and not supplement first, because then you can either get very high levels of something you don't want, or you can be deficient in other minerals as it relates to the ratios.
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, a couple of other items I wanted to ask you with the significant ratios is my zinc to copper ratio. My copper is so high, and that's because I've been taking a trace elements supplement, which has 100% copper um, for every day. And so my copper is literally off the charts, which is reducing my ratios of zinc to copper and iron to copper on the significant ratio. So again, I guess my takeaway is to reduce my copper intake
Yeah.
to kind of
So,
balance these.
yep, exactly. Yeah. And, I know we've already talked about diet and everything during consultations. One of the things that the nutritionists that I have taking these calls will talk with you about is they'll ask you what you're supplementing, and they'll ask you what your diet is like and what your goals are. So that would have been one thing that we covered is, hey, are you, we see that you're elevated in, this and this and this. Are you supplementing that currently? Because that's an easy thing to correct. We actually induce nutritional deficiencies through supplementation all the time because we think we're low in something. We think we have this, or what appears to be symptoms of anemia, for example, may actually be, copper deficiency. So speaking of things that you can supplement, though, one thing that I would recommend is, as it's related to this and as it's related to one of your other ratios here, iron to copper, is your iron level. So your iron level is a little low. We mentioned grass-fed meats, nose-to-tail eating, things like that. That's the easy solution because the heme in plants is bound up pretty tightly. But by bringing in vitamin C, you can absorb that iron a little better. So if you'll do that whenever you're having your meals, or just in general, but especially with a meal, that's really going to be helpful.
Great point, Barton. Thank you. And I definitely need more iron because I'm working on improving my hair currently and having the best hair that I can. And I know that iron is very important, particularly because it moves oxygen throughout your body, transports oxygen, and oxygen or low oxygen has been correlated in areas where there's diffuse thinning or even balding. And so that's just one instance of where your body is lacking the oxygen transport mechanism to get it into your hair. And that also applies to other areas of your body because your scalp is just an extension of your extremities. And so if you're low in iron, then that's going to cause downstream impacts. Now, you did mention that the absorption rate with spinach or non-meat sources of iron is pretty low, but you can increase that if you take vitamin C at the same time. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I mean that would be true for for animal products as well. I just meant blanket statement. If you're consuming your iron from plants, as you would if you're vegetarian or vegan, just know that that's a consideration you have to take into account as you choose your diet. It's going to be more difficult. So.
Yeah. And recently what I've learned is that men, if you're eating a lot of meat, you can have excess iron in your body, but especially women that are premenopausal, which are in the reproductive age, are typically low in iron because of the monthly menstruation cycle where they lose a lot of blood, and that takes the iron with it. Is that something you see regularly, Barton?
Yes and no. Yes and no. It's hard to say. A lot of our patients are pretty savvy people, and they are making dietary. They know, they're taking into account thoughts like that, and they're morphing their diet to try to meet and match those things. So it just depends. It really does.
Yeah.
Other things that they may be Consuming also or supplementing, right, may also induce a nutritional deficiency that you wouldn't think they would have. So there's that side of it too. It's always fascinating, but I would say, yeah, there's probably in 60% of the cases, at least, we're seeing some low iron. Manganese is often low as well. So our sugar support is something that people tend to lean towards, and it helps people from that standpoint with the manganese and the chromium, zinc, just have less sugar craving. So then they kind of stay on the wagon, so to speak, a little longer. Don't give in to those late night snacks, which then would keep them awake at night and keep them from getting that good night's sleep that they need, and just like keep them on a virtuous sort of cycle. So, yeah.
Agreed. And I've been supplementing with zinc as well. Again, for my hair, it's known to at least zinc deficiency has been linked to hair loss, and so I've been supplementing with zinc. But what I notice is that my zinc to copper ratio is also low because I'm so high in copper.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's something I'll take away, reduce my copper intake. Now, Barton, let's move on to the toxic ratios table. I want to dive into this. There's a low end of the spectrum and there's acceptable, and I'm high on all, except as you mentioned, I'm low on iron to mercury.
Yeah.
As well as iron to, what's the other one? What's PB stand for?
Right. So in this particular case, this is an example of where a lot of people can misinterpret their levels. In toxic ratios, where you want to see them here, and this may be what you were intending to say is your ratios, you actually want them to be quote unquote off the charts in this section because they're in the acceptable range. So yeah, this is looking really good. Really the only problem areas are your iron to lead. So, yep. And iron to mercury. So,
okay.
Yep.
Got it. I know what to do there.
Yep.
And then lastly, Barton, so going back to the toxic ratios, what you're saying is on this table or on this chart, everybody should be high.
Yeah, correct.
At least acceptable, but higher is better.
Right. Yeah, there's just the acceptable range that continues off the chart. Yeah, correct.
Okay, got it. And then, so let's move on to the next table, which is the additional ratios. And so please help me understand what this table means. Yeah,
so the additional ratios is truly, I would say, not an area of focus on your first hair analysis. There's always going to be more things. This is an iterative process. We don't want to try to tackle too many things. Most people right about now are going, you know what, if this was my results, I think I'd have enough to chew on for the next 90 days. But these things are lithium, for example, which your level is good, and that can relate to mood. Germanium, which also moves oxygen around the body and can be linked to intelligence. Most people are low in that, but the germanium, to be fair, is difficult to register. It's in very, very small amounts in the body. So, those are some thoughts. Some foods purported to have germanium would be things like garlic. But again, it depends on the soil. Has the soil had garlic grown in it for the last 13 years in a row? If so, it's probably pulled out what it had in that area. So, and there's other food and other examples, of course, as well. But this section, truly, at this point, I would say we've covered the most important sections of the results. There's vanadium here, which also can be linked to sugar cravings and the relationship between insulin and glucose. But you're looking really good throughout here. So there's nothing screaming at us.
Okay, great. And the last bit I want to cover with you, Barton, is the toxic elements.
Yeah, sure.
And luckily, when I saw this, I jumped for joy because I'm low in lead, aluminum, and mercury, which are some of the higher toxic loads in our society these days.
Yeah.
Do you
Yep.
see people? I mean, of course, everybody coming to you is probably taking care of their health because not every doctor prescribes a hair mineral analysis.
Right.
And so, do you see a lot of those three elements that are toxic loads?
Yeah, I would say just a note there is that, if you take one of these to your doctor, just that on that first point you said, they probably, it's not their fault. They just weren't trained in this in school, and they'll read it about as well as you will. They just will have enough hubris to think that they should know it. That's been my patient's experience, and often. So they've come back and they said, hey, I didn't really get a whole lot of useful information. So it's just like anything else, like use someone that has the training. So whether that's us or someone else. But yeah, in this particular case, in your case, Faraz, you're looking great here.
Mhm.
Everything is within the reference range. For the most part, it's really low. So this wouldn't be an area of focus for you. Really, it's just in your particular case, the significant ratios and just your nutritional elements
Okay.
are really where we want to focus in and dial in. The one
Mhm.
other thing I did want to mention is that your cobalt could use some improvement, and that's cobalamin, so B12, which would be related to mood, obviously, and
Mhm.
other enzymatic processes in the body. So you could do something like possibly the liposomal B vitamin.
Mhm.
So,
Got it. Okay, good to know.
yep, but looking
Definitely.
great. I think this is a great review, and how does that make sense? It seems like you followed everything really well. Obviously not surprised. You know your stuff. So, um,
Absolutely. This is, folks, for
is that
those
helpful?
listening, that is very helpful. Understanding this and just knowing my levels, because I've gotten blood tests done, once a year, once every couple of years, in the last 10 years. And I would have never known these elements, honestly.
Mm.
You get iron, you get ferritin with blood, but you don't get this level of details in any blood test that I've ever done. So I am thankful to understand what's really going on with the minerals in my body, and I'm extremely thankful that my toxic load is very
Yeah.
low. And so I'm a fan, and I'll be doing this test moving forward. I think I'll do one in the next 3 to 4 months, and then
Yeah, every 90 days, I would
yeah,
say. In your case, if you're running, marathons or competing or something like that, and doing something really strenuous, we could bring that down to every 60 days. Um, but yeah, I think this is 90 days is really good. Quarterly for most people is the right way, at least for the first couple quarters, and then you have an idea, and you start to develop. Just the intuition, if you do quarterly for say the first year, and then from there you might space it out more.
mhm,
Uh, but then, yeah, for example, I mean, I'm a walking indication machine. I can tell anything. I can tell so much about my body now by just the physical reactions, the things I'm noticing, the things I'm excelling at and not excelling at. And can pretty much map out what my results will be. But that's taken years, and also looking at so many of these analyses. So
so I bet you've got yours dialed into a T, don't you?
yeah, it's pretty good. There's always room for optimization, though.
Hmm.
So
That's the advantage of being the founder of a company that does this, is you can do this at will,
yeah,
weekly if you want. Uh,
yeah, certainly.
but great, Barton. Thank you very much for coming back on. I appreciate it. This is an eye opener for
Oh,
me,
thank you
and
for having me.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I hope that people do at least get their first hair mineral analysis test to see where they're at, and then they can use the different supplements or even diet changes to improve their levels and live optimally, really.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I one thing I would just also say to people is just invest in your health. I mean, the return on investment in sleeping just even a little bit better, or having a little more energy, getting that one extra thing done, being able to say yes to this one other thing, it just changes your life so immensely. And there's no way I would have been able to really build the business and my life if I had the energy I used to have, which was pretty abysmal. So I would say, certainly pick up at least a 20-minute, if not a 45-minute consultation, because I want you to understand this so that you can carry it forward into your life. I think it'll really make a difference. I know you'll love how you feel.
Great. Well, Barton, thank you for coming back on, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.